So for our first in-person interview for the Christian Business Project, I have my friend, also my accountant, Charity Tabor. She's been a practicing accountant for 25 years. I don't know if that's how long you've been a CPA, certainly, but a practicing accountant. She is the co-owner and founder of Tabor and Burnett over in Burnett, to keep people in Central Texas, for those of you listening around the country. But I know Charity well. I trust her. I obviously utilize her services and her professionalism in guiding my businesses and those of my clients. But also we are fellow believers in Christ. And I feel like this is an appropriate person to talk to about finance, taxes, and other subjects that she deems necessary as we talk about what God says about business. So welcome, Charity.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, so let me just start with this, because I know we have a schedule that's pretty tight because you actually have work to do. I kind of wanted to know if you think about this, and probably do, but how does your faith influence or impact how you conduct your business and that of your clients? Because you're in a very complicated and deep industry in terms of taxes and finance and those things.
Sure. It's also a very personal relationship. I mean, people are very private about their finances. So I think that plays a lot into what I do as a professional. I want to be above reproach, just like the Bible tells us to be in all of our activities, not just in my personal life, but in my professional life. I know it sounds a little cheesy, but I want to be a light in a dark place, because it's not very much fun to talk about taxes and to follow the guidelines that are provided by the IRS. So, I mean, that is a undercurrent of what I do every day. I hope that, every day I can, be the best that I can be at what I do and touch the people that that God brings across my path.
It's a good point. I hadn't actually thought to ask about that, but finances are very personal to people. And you get to see parts of people's lives that nobody else gets to see, I'm sure, both good and bad. Outside of the specific boundaries of professional courtesy and all those things. Are there times when people are kind of seeking broader guidance than just how they conduct their finances? Like, for example, how do I do this better, more honestly, above reproach, as you said, with greater integrity? Do you get opportunities to lend that kind of strategy and expertise as well?
I do. I mean, I have, some clients who obviously know about my faith, and they ask me questions to help them to make the choices and make decisions, or even just ask me to pray with them over decisions that they have to make. I have, obviously I've had clients in the past, not always, but ask me about tithing and how I feel about certain concepts of tithing, whether on, gross or net, or on their wages or on their retirement. Things like that have come along because people know my faith and ask me questions along that line.
It's really good. I've actually done that with you. I want to kind of lean into taxes a little bit. It's a controversial subject for a lot of people, but specifically for Christians. And I think sometimes we misutilize scripture to justify a belief we want to have or that we already have and try to back into that. You're in an interesting place in that you kind of stand between the IRS and state reporting services and your clients, and have to give them good guidance, regardless of whether you believe it's a good idea or not. And I kind of wanted to lean into that a little bit, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's probably times when something may be legal, but is it necessarily biblical, if that makes sense? How do you kind of walk that fine line? Because that's I know the legal requirements, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I want people to hear this.
That's an interesting question. I had never really thought about it before, but I'm pretty black and white when it comes to how I run my business and how I comply with the tax law. So honestly, I believe that there's been very few or very rare instances where I feel like something that's legal in terms of tax law is not biblical. Because I think the Bible, and I believe God established the governments that are above us for whatever reason He did, and I think we're supposed to follow those guidelines. But I am very black and white when it comes to the tax law. So when I'm talking about interpreting a tax position, I usually won't do something unless I feel like I can defend it in accordance with the governance and of the laws that God's established above us.
It's really good, and I felt like you'd say that. The second part of it is you only know what you know. And just as a professional, I know that we're all trying to gain the greatest benefit gospel as it relates to the
Mhm.
tax code. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I also know that I've been guilty of this in the past, and I think we rectified it. This has been a long time ago when I was very, very young. If the IRS is watching this, but where you don't necessarily report everything. And my belief is that regardless of whether you believe it's right or not, reporting things with integrity is just as important as how you, as a professional, deal with those numbers. Do you kind of believe that to be true as well, or do you have a different view?
Absolutely. I mean, it goes even beyond tithing. I don't think we want to discount the blessings that God has for us when we're honest and when we're true to what He wants us to do, whether that's, paying our tithes, or whether that's filing our taxes, or whether that's being kind to the person that's walking down the street. So for me, it's in order to be in God's will, I think that we need to follow the laws that God has put above us. So yes, I do believe the integrity there. And I've had some conflicts with some clients who have been in churches with me who have not been as compliant as I would like them to be, or have the integrity, at least from a tax standpoint, that I would like them to have. And that has been a conflict, not necessarily a conflict with the laws that the IRS has put into place, but conflicts with clients that I've had along the years.
I think all of us in business can have that same influence, and I'm glad it's coming from you too. The priority always is what glorifies God and what's honorable to Him, and then what is beneficial to us obviously falls down the pole a little bit. It's interesting that you put it that way too, that you would bring it to their attention, as a fellow believer. Is that same question asked of people who don't profess to be Christians?
Absolutely. Maybe it's not phrased the same way, because I certainly don't want to push my faith on anyone, but the concept is still there about integrity, and we also believe that if the client doesn't know, if the client isn't educated, the client can't make the best choices and decisions for themselves. So once they have that knowledge, once they have that, they have a responsibility and accountability to us and to the IRS to do things according to the law. So yes, the same question is posed to even those that may or may not be believers that are also clients.
It's really funny that 100%. I've got a couple of takeaways from you already. One is to be completely transparent and honest with you, because you're obviously the one with knowledge, but also the person who's our conduit to the governing authorities God has put into place. But the second thing is let's not be ignorant. Let's understand better what laws are out there. It's not, we're not out there debating the merits and the effectiveness of those tax laws as much as
that's a whole other discussion.
The whole other discussion, but understanding what they are and being honest. And it's interesting, as an aside, Jesus talked about the coins, and the Pharisees were trying to trap him. And, he said, give unto Caesar, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, render unto God the things that are God's. He's essentially saying the priority is eternity. The priority is not the short term of what's here. It wasn't necessarily a treatise on the morality or effectiveness of taxes as much as do what's expected of you here. That glorifies God.
Right.
But the greater impact is what eternity is about. And I think you did a really nice job of depicting that. I asked this earlier, but I want to kind of circle back to it. When people find out about your faith, do they lean more heavily on your expertise, or do you sometimes find the complete opposite is true and they become a little more guarded?
In most cases, I think they lean more on me. I think they trust me more. And that's, like I said from the beginning, because we're such a personal relationship with our clients. I think they trust me more because of my faith, those who have like-minded faith anyway. I have a few that have been more guarded over the years, the ones that want to be a little more aggressive and push the envelope when it comes to tax law. So they tread lightly with me, or they go find another accountant, which is fine. And that's certainly something that they can do. But I think in the majority of cases, I think people trust me and do lean in more and ask different questions like tithing and things like that of me.
For sure. There's another takeaway. If you don't have an accountant who professes what you profess, it's okay to shop around on occasion.
Absolutely.
I obviously endorse this one. This is interesting too. There's a couple of parallels here. So this is a little bit different question, but as you've matured both as a professional accountant and as a Christian kind of simultaneously, have you found anything about your view of how the Bible speaks of finances or taxes has changed?
Um, I'm sure. I'm sure as I've matured over the years, I've learned more about, from, 95 when I graduated college, I learned more about tithing and finances. But mostly I think I've learned more about being a good steward, not only of my funds, my finances, but the finances of my clients, because nobody wants to pay more than they're supposed to pay or entitled, and supposed to pay according to the law. So I certainly want to be a good steward of that. And I'm always Phyllis and I are both always trying to learn about new ways and new things that we didn't know before to save our clients' tax money. So that's certainly not something that I dismiss. I don't automatically try to pay the most taxes that I can, but I'm always looking for ways to improve that, to be a good steward. So I think that just comes with maturity.
I think it does too. It's interesting. There are times when I'm reading the Bible or a Bible study or whatever, and I'll find some applicability to my business. And it happens more and more as I mature in my faith as well, trying to find God in everything. Do you still find that to be the case, where you're maybe in the middle of a study or hearing a sermon maybe or something, and you immediately jump to, hey, this is completely applicable to my business or my clients, and I hadn't thought about that?
Absolutely. I think more along the lines of my personal relationships, my interactions with people, just wanting to represent the best person that I can be, living the life, walking the walk. I mean, I think, and from that standpoint, every day, I learn something new every day. Yeah.
Very good. Let me ask a question that I didn't actually send you in our little pre-show thing, but if suppose somebody like me is coming in to utilize your services, and you know that I'm a Christian, what are some foundational things you're going to talk about with me as a business person, but also a professing Christian? What are some strategies you may outline and some things you may want to know more about so that you can best help me do what I need to have done?
Well, I think we always start with what kind of business are you in? What is your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with your business, and how are you going to do that? And then we start talking about the guidelines, the things that are important, the things that you need to keep track of, the things that you need to watch for, as far as, making sure that you're going to be in compliance with the guidelines and the tax rules that we have to implement.
Last question, because I know you actually have a job to do today. This one's kind of tough, and you're speculating here just like any of us would. But as the culture around us and the world around us becomes probably less Christian, just on the whole, there may be some things that we as Christian business people may find in conflict with what we know God would have us do. And without getting into great specifics, but benefits are one that tends to come up quite a bit. Other things may be things that our tax dollars are utilized for that we may find in conflict with what God says. How do you, as somebody who has some responsibility for steering that ship, address those questions as they come up, and as we continue to move forward in what's generally called a post-Christian world? Is that going to become difficult for you as a professional to deal with those things if they happen?
Sure, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think if something comes along that for a very simple example would be, I think that the tax law favors single individuals over married individuals, which hurts my heart as a Christian, because I think that they're not supporting marriages, which I think is very important. I think it's talked about in the Bible. I think the community of that relationship is very important to people. So that seems like a very, very high level example. But yes, I do believe there are going to be things that probably will come along that I won't agree with. And I'm not sure how I'm going to handle those. I'm going to pray about it. And if there's something that's in conflict with what I agree with, that probably I'm not going to take the client. That wouldn't be the first time that I've not taken a client that hasn't agreed. And not an individual client, but a particular business that has asked me to help them in the nonprofit sector, that I didn't agree with what they were doing because I didn't think it was biblical. And so I think that's, probably how I would handle it. Pray about it. And then if it's something that I just don't agree with, and I just don't think that I would be involved with it.
Yeah, and that's complicated too, because there are times more and more when you are limited in your ability to take on, not specifically you, but in certain businesses where we're going to the courts with, do we have to service this business because they want to utilize our service? It's going to be more complicated. And I think your advice about prayerful consideration is worth it. But also, for those that are listening, charity is a great example of, you can be the best listener, the best communicator, the most well-read biblical scholar of anybody in your circle. But if you're terrible at your job, you're not helping. So stay educated, continue to get better at what you do, and understand better what's being asked of you, not just with finances and taxes, but in whatever business you're in. Again, really nice people are great to have around, and really insightful and kind Christians are really great to have around. We need them in our community, but we also need to be doing it with excellence. So, yes. Well, Charity, this was brief, and I tried not to violate any confidences. So I was really trying hard not to ask pointed questions, but I would encourage people. Obviously, your tax preparer, your CPA, is one of the critical legs of your business stool, as they say, with along with legal and strategic expertise and others. Get yourself somebody like Charity who can not only help guide you with what she knows, and she's the best at it, but also kind of go along with what you know to be true about what God says. So anything else, Charity, before we call it a day?
I guess that's it. Just, like you were saying, for all businesses, just live in transparency, live in the truth, and try to be humble about, for me, be humble for what God's blessed me with, not just in my education, but in my business and the clients and stuff that I have. So just be grateful.
Very good. Charity Tabor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.